the houses we're building, all electric houses, everything is powered by electricity. A well-sealed home is going to have a lower heating bill. The reduction in fuel bills can be vastly significant.
Getting into a new mindset for what is basically a machine, right? And more so than houses used to be. And that needs to be treated with some respect in terms of how it operates in order to keep it operating well.
What a heat pump does is it uses that electricity not to simply burn it to create heat, but it uses it to power a device that extracts heat from the surroundings. So it'll extract a little bit of heat from the outside, theoretically lower the outside temperature a little bit, bring that heat inside and raise the interior house temperature by a lot. And it took a while for engineers to realize that if you change the envelope, you could also change the heating system. You heated it differently, it was differently comfortable, it cost less, all sorts of things changed. And that's the systematic view of how we think about energy efficiencies and so forth.
So the whole house is the machine.
That's right.
Our house is our distribution system. The assumption is if you leave the door open, the heat will want to go into the other room because it's cooler in there, and that's how heat flows.
Yeah, people are used to these systems that just dump heat, right? So much heat in an inefficient way. And so, you know, if your house gets too cool, then you turn up the heat really high, and then it heats it up too warm, and then you turn off the heat and it gets too cold again. And so with a system like this, you just want to leave it the same all the time. You don't want to leave the house and like drop it down to 64 or 60 or whatever your set point is, because the system is not built to dump so much heat that it can heat it back up to 68 later. You just leave it and it will still use less energy than if you're doing that cycling up and down.
In addition to the cellulose and the 2x6 framing, there's also rigid foam.
The surface temperatures, because of the higher insulation values, are warmer.
Yeah.
So the exterior wall, the floor, the ceiling, you're navigating through the space as opposed to your log gap.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've been in a house where you're like sitting close to the window and you're like cold and you move away from the window and you're warmer. That just happens less. We have more insulation in the windows. We're capturing heat better because, you know, thermal energy wants to move from warm to cold. And so if you're near a cold surface, if you're touching a cold surface, it'll just suck heat away. That will happen less here. You can be anywhere in the house. You can sit next to the window and get light and read a book, and you won't feel as uncomfortable. Because you're used to this blast of, like I said, overcompensating heat to try to get the whole space up to temperature. And that's just not how this sort of building operates.
Part of our goal is that affordability. We're advocating the slipper solution, not the radiant heat anymore.
Exactly.
Heat pumps are a more sophisticated device. It's a much more efficient way of doing it, and basically it's 2 or 3 times more efficient. Utility bills are no longer spread over multiple fuel sources. You should expect it to be a little higher, of course, particularly in the heating seasons and I guess in the cooling seasons if you use it for air conditioning as well, because the heat pump gives you the option not only of heating your house but also of cooling your house as well, and that might be an additional load. So be prepared to expect that you're going to have some additional electrical costs in summer if you use the device to cool your house. But it's nice to have one single solitary source of energy.
It's super insulated.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has some solar heat gain. It's got efficient, you know, electrical systems and HRV.
Some ventilation.
Ventilation is super important. The solar gain through windows, you know, a lot on the south, very little on the north.
But overall, this concept is you build a good envelope, make it not too big so you don't have a big heating load.
Yes.
So water heating is kind of one of those last things to check off the list.
Yes. But so important and like really great and fundamental in terms of making something like this successful.
Yeah, and so net zero doesn't mean you have zero electric bill all year long. The winter, you're likely to have, you get a budget for that bill in the winter. Since everything's electric, it's from your water heating to the lights on to the heat and all of those things to say, all right, you know, maybe we're going to use a little more energy this year because it's extra cold, or we have lots of heat waves and you air condition a lot in the summer. You know, there's these balance between money and comfort that the homeowners have to make choices on throughout the year. That's why we call them zero net energy possible houses, because Each year is different weather-wise. Each homeowner has different needs for how they live in their house. Some people go to work and leave their house all day. Some people are home all day, and that uses more energy.
There's no fossil fuel involved. There's great benefits to that. You also don't have all of the maintenance obligations of maintaining boilers and so forth. You don't have the air quality concerns that burning fossil fuels gives to you. It's certainly true that you don't have an oil tank. You don't have a potential environmental hazard in your basement that at some point could leak. So there are all sorts of benefits to moving away from fossil fuel heats of one sort or another, and particularly oil heating for all of those reasons.
We still get monthly electric bills, just like we did before solar. But the difference will be that there's a net on the bill. And sometimes you owe a little, and sometimes the utility owes you a little. And so that becomes a slush fund, essentially, on the electric bill, with monies being credited or debited. And over the course of a year, if you sort of get the house loads and the solar generation in balance, then the electric bill sort of goes away. With the PV added, then the roof will become slippery and snow will want to slide to the ground. So people should be aware that that will happen.
The amount of energy that you use electrically for the house will be generated by that PV system. So theoretically, the cost of electricity to you will be zero.
And these buildings are tidy in their energy requirements. And so it becomes more possible for this sort of phrase that everybody hears, net zero.
You're feeding that electricity into the grid during the day, and at night you are taking it back when there's no sun, no electricity generated by the house, but you need to cook and you need the lights to read and the TV and so forth. So it's a two-way exchange. So yes, you need to be connected to a grid. We need the grid to make our houses work, even though they are net zero.